So we've learnt about what an ecosystem is, and the main idea to remember in an ecosystem is that it's all about the interactions. Interactions between all of the living things, the biotic factors, and the non-living things, the abiotic factors in an environment. So one way that we can show some interactions in an ecosystem is with a food chain. And we're going to make a food chain using these organisms down here. And a food chain shows us basically what eats what in our ecosystem. So what we have here is some grass. We have a bull ant. We have a blue-tongued lizard. And we have a wedge-tailed eagle. All species that we can find in Australia. So the first species in our food chain is the grass. And grass and all other plants, they get their energy from the sun. So they don't need to eat other food. They get energy from the non-living part of the environment. And then bull ants come along and they eat some of the plants. And on our food chain, we draw an arrow here to show that the bull ant eats the grass. And in this ecosystem, blue-tongued lizards eat the bull ants. So we'll draw another arrow to show that the blue-tongued lizard is eating the bull ant. And then wedge-tailed eagles, they eat blue-tongued lizards as one of their food sources. Often animals have lots of different types of food, but a food chain here just shows one type of food. So next, there are a few different words to learn about to describe organisms in a food chain. The first thing is predator and prey. Predator is a species that eats another species, while a prey is the opposite. It is eaten by another species. Eaten by another. So looking at our food chain, we can see that the grass is eaten by the bull ant. So the grass is a prey. And that must mean that the bull ant is a predator. But then looking further along the food chain, the bull ant is also eaten by the blue-tongued lizard. So the bull ant is a prey to something else as well, while the blue-tongued lizard is a predator. So the food chain shows that a lot of species can be a predator and a prey at the same time. But we can see that the grass is only a prey, and the wedge-tailed eagle, nothing else eats it, so it is only a predator. The next two words that we'll look at, the next two ideas, are producer and consumer. And every plant is a producer, as well as other things like algae. So all plants and algae are producers, and we find them always at the very start of a food chain because they make their own food. They produce their own food. Or in other words, they get their energy from the sun instead of eating something else. Whereas a consumer, which includes all of the other animals here, the bull ant, the blue tongue, and the wedge-tailed eagle. All of these are consumers because they eat other living things. Eat other organisms. So this includes all of our other kingdoms that we've learnt about, animals and fungi, protists and bacteria. These are all consumers, although some bacteria are producers as well, and some protists. Finally, there are different ways that we can name each step in our food chain. So we had our producer, which is our plant. The next organism along in the food chain is our first consumer, and we can call that the first order consumer. Sometimes you might hear it being called the primary consumer as well. The primary consumer eats plants, so it eats the producers, which means that all the first order consumers must be herbivores. So we have things like kangaroos, wombats, our example here, bull ants, and lots of other insects. They're all first order consumers. If we look at the next animal along, this is the consumer that eats the first order consumer. So our blue-tongued lizard, we will call our second order consumer. And these eat the first consumers. And seeing as these ones eat other animals, second order consumers are always carnivores, meaning they eat meat only. Lastly, looking at our food chain, the wedge-tailed eagle, as you can probably guess, we call the third order consumer. Third order consumer. And they eat the second order consumers. And again, they're carnivores because they eat other animals.